Tonight we spoke about revitalizing your marriage or any other relationship, gave 3 supremely practical, essential tools for a total positivity transformation. You will be so happy you attended tonight's class. What we're talking about tonight is, in a sense, marriage, but really it's all relationships, because all relationships are relationships. And for anyone who's married, probably, I would hope and assume, the most significant relationship in their life is with their spouse. So that's maybe the one we should focus on. But really, all relationships are relationships, and whatever we're going to discuss works for all relationships. You could use it for your mom, you could use it for your mother-in-law, you could use it for your sister, for your colleague, for your neighbor. Relationships are relationships. And there's really one message that I wanted to focus on tonight. And I really wanted to circle around one concept and then to apply it in the practical in terms of marriage, in terms of life, and in terms of all relationships. The concept to revitalize marriage, to revitalize any and all relationships, including, of course, with God, is the concept of positivity. Positivity is huge in life. It's huge in all relationships. It's huge in our life as a Jew, and it's huge in our marriage. Of course, we understand. I mean, positivity, like be positive, like, of course, that's of course, better be positive than the opposite, if you got 2 choices. So we all agree with the value. I don't think there'd be any dissenting voices saying, no, like it's good if you're in a bad mood to like make sure everyone knows about it and like stew in it for a long time. That's a great virtue. I don't think that's being contested. But like many other great values, and of course we discuss weekly great values, and we generally aren't bored with the values, but always the challenge is translating that value into practical reality, into daily reality, into action, making it actionable. Because I know for myself, I can have this idea in the back of my head like joy, right? We've spoken about joy, and I believe it's a great virtue, and I always want to be joyous. So what do I have just in the back of my head? This, pulsating beat: be happy, be joyous, act joyous, feel joyous, be joyous. It doesn't work. If I can translate it into an action, I can do that action. I can walk that walk. And through that, I'm scaffolding to really achieve the ideal. So same thing here with just being positive in our relationship with our husband, with our children, with our parents, with our in-laws, with our boss and coworkers and colleagues and neighbors, the people we go to synagogue with all of these people. The more positive we are in terms of the relationship, the better it's going to be. And again, I think we all agree on that. Making it practical. So if you would want to work on a relationship, you got to focus on that relationship and instill positivity in that relationship. So I'm going to use marriage as the example. That was what I titled this. So I don't want to be, putting out bait there. That's not true to what we're discussing. But again, you can take this and apply it in any relationship in your life. So something really wonderful that I believe in, because I always talk about it, but I think you can also use it in this arena, is writing down gratitudes. And you can make this God-centered, but marriage-centered, or any other relationship you're working on centered. And really, I'd say do it twice a day. And I'd say every time, demand from yourself, you're going to write down 5 things. And you can say, thank you, God, for, and then write down each blessing in your marriage. You want this to be in terms of you and a child that you're having a hard time having positivity in thinking about their future or your relationship or them. Do it for that child. Thank you, God. And then write down for what, and write down for what, and demand from yourself to come up with 5 things, and do this twice a day. Is it okay if every time you write the same 5 things? It's not great, but it's still good. It's honestly still good. Every time you write, writing really embeds it in our brain. So if you had stress with a child or with a friendship that was not doing well, or with a business partner, and you really say, I want to shift this energy. I want to make it good. And again, we're saying critically with your spouse or with a parent. twice a day, sit down and force yourself to look and see the blessings in that relationship. And when you're feeling anxious about the relationship, when you're feeling stressed about the relationship, review your notes, review what you wrote down. And it's nice as you're writing it to say it out loud. Again, it's another layer of getting it inside of you. I'm so great. Thank you that he takes out the garbage, even though it's his responsibility. Don't go there. Thank you. That's so nice. It's one thing he does that I don't have to do. We would think if someone came and UPS came to your door instead of just throwing a box over your fence. But if they did something old-fashioned and came to your door, you say thank you. If someone brought you a delivery, you'd say thank you. If you're in your office and someone comes in and takes out the garbage, you'd say thank you. Well, why are we saying thank you? It's their job. The delivery boy is his job, and the janitor is his job, and the UPS is his job. So I'm going to say thank you. It's their job, because that is how a courteous, honorable, kind, compassionate, as we would say in the Jewish mensch, a menschlich person who behaves appropriately. That's how we treat people. So it's okay to say thank you for something that's someone's job. The fact that it's their job doesn't take away our gratitude that they're doing their job. They're doing their job with a smile. They're doing their job well. It's nice. It's honorable. It's really, really the way to live. So just like most of us, I imagine, with the delivery boy or the UPS or the janitor, say thank you nicely. We look at them in the eye. We acknowledge them. I think we were discussing last week this idea of using people's names. We say thank you. So when your husband is doing something, the same rules of proper conduct apply. Suddenly, well, it's his job. Why am I thanking him for his job? And is it appropriate to be thanked for making a nice supper? It is. It's your job. So what? You did your job. And even if it's not such a nice supper, you could also be thanked. You worked for it. It took some time. So it's just, again, adding that positive energy to the relationship. So yes, as we're writing down, because here we really are talking about writing down things and being thankful for things, we can be thankful and grateful for your husband for doing things that we view as his job. Thank you, my husband goes and works and provides for us financially. Well, is he supposed to do that? We don't look at it like that. Thank you for him doing what I'm viewing as his job. So of course, we've discussed this idea before, maybe not specifically in terms of relationships. Definitely we discussed this in terms of our relationship with God. But here we're actually talking about it in terms of a human relationship. So we're sort of like combining the pieces. We've spoken many times of daily writing thank yous to God. And that's a really strong, powerful tool to bring you and God in a very close relationship. And now we're saying you're writing thank you to God, but specifically about your marriage or about any other relationship that you want to work on. I highly recommend it because I highly believe in this whole concept. Now, I use this in terms of my relationship with God. But the truth is, when I first heard the concept some 30 years ago, I was actually in a workshop on counseling, on marital counseling. I don't know if the other person spoke about writing it down, but the person spoke about, having the couple think of something nice their spouse did for them that day. I remember saying, and if they can't think of anything nice the person did in the past 24 hours, their marriage is in big trouble. And I thought, wow, if I can't think of anything good God did for me in the past 24 hours, I guess my relationship there is in big trouble. So let me focus on this. But actually, the origin of this concept was really in terms of marriage. I just hijacked it in terms of relationship to God and I'm using it that way for some 30 years. But it really is a super powerful tool. I know I'm talking a lot about it. I know it's a simple idea, but it helps me so much. It's just so integral to my life and my relationship to God. And I know that taking this and using it in terms of a relationship like marriage or any other relationship that you want to enhance, it's the same super powerful tool. And just like in terms of relationship to God, once you write it down, you always have the ability to reread it. So if you're feeling down about the relationship or stressed about the relationship or unhappy about the relationship, and then you can read what you wrote for the past 2 days or 3 months, and it just centers you. It just reminds you of the whole picture, not just what happened the past 20 minutes or 2 days. And it really gives you a perspective, and you could breathe and appreciate that there's a lot of good in the relationship. There might also be things we want to work on, but there's also a lot of good in the relationship. Just like if you're feeling stressed in your life and you have a thank you God journal and you reread it, and it centers you and grounds you and reminds you that God's with you and God's taking care of you. And also in this, God's there and it's going to be okay. So it works in terms of our relationship with God when we have this general thank you God journal to help us see the good and God's kindnesses all day long. And it works in terms of a marriage or any other relationship when you're really focusing on gratitude for the details of the marriage. It works to strengthen that muscle of appreciating the good, of looking at things with a good eye, because you're searching to find 5 things. So you're really, really scrutinizing and seeing the good. And rereading it really reminds you of the perspective, not just what's happening now or the crash of the moment, but you see overall. And it's so that I put first, because as you can see, I love this tool. I believe in this tool. I use this tool, and I highly wish and hope everyone else does as well. I'm being a little stricter on marriage than I would normally say. I'm saying twice a day, 5 things each time. I know that's sort of putting you into a box. You can write 10 if you want, of course. I'm saying at least 5. The reason I'm saying that is because sometimes if there's not a lot of positivity in your marriage, okay, whatever, you'll sort of once a day, maybe put down something. No, push yourself. And I have total confidence that you will find plenty to write. That was idea number 1. One thought. A second thought, which again applies for your marriage, applies for every relationship in your life, applies for you as a person. It will help you, forget about the other people in your life, is really watching and reframing negativity. Some of us speak in a very negative way. Some of us control our speech, but we think in a very negative way. Now, the negativity could be coming from fear. Let's say the relationship we're talking about is with a child. And maybe you're fearful for the child's current state or their future that you just see as very bleak, or your future in your relationship with them. So there could be reasons, but negativity, again, puts that poison into the relationship, that poison into your life. It's a very big commitment. For some people, it's very, very difficult. I've seen this in my years as a teacher, that some people it's just their nature. They're so pessimistic. They're so negative. Their thoughts go in such obvious negative ways. Their speech is so obviously negative. Sometimes I speak to someone about, say, their relationship with their husband, and the way they talk about their husband, like, I cringe, and sometimes I'm seeing, and that's how they talk to each other. It's painful for me. So some people, this is a monumental challenge. And for some people, it's just a challenge because it's easier to be negative than positive. It's easier to eat the cookie than control yourself and not. The first step here is identifying. It's a commitment for people that have been for the past 60 years thinking a certain way or speaking a certain way. It's not an overnight change, but it's a overnight immediate commitment, a serious commitment, believing this will really help me. This will really help my life. My life will be so much better if I only thought in a different way, if I only spoke in a different way. It really would be. Again, if I'm telling you, I believe in it. So the first step, of course, is the commitment. But what are you committing to? Identifying it. Identifying it. For some people, it's too hard to start identifying the negativity in their thoughts. So go for your speech. That's a little more concrete. For some people, how can I work on my speech if I'm not working on my thoughts? Obviously, speech is just expressing what I'm thinking, which is true. So the commitment to start by identifying, labeling, ooh, that was negative. That was pessimistic. That was a put down. That was slanted in a very negative direction. That was dark. That was bleak. That was not positive. That was nasty. For some reason, many of us are at our nastiest when we talk to our husbands, or some of us are at our nastiest when we talk to our children, or some of us both. And of course, some of us are not. What can I say? They're safer targets, whatever. We all know it. But to commit to really identify, if you're focusing on language, if you're focusing on thoughts, if you're focusing on both, identify that it's negative. That's the first step. Stop and identify it. And then the second step is to reframe it, to really shift. You identify, no, that's really not a nice thing to say. Say it in a positive way. Just don't say anything if you can't think of a positive way to say it. Stop the thought. Try to twist it to make up a positive thought. Or if you can't think of any positive thought, just change the channel. Or they would use it as a, abbreviation. JK, just kidding. So sometimes we give ourselves also like a little permission to think and say things that are not nice. And it's almost like we put a big just kidding around all of our interactions. And again, maybe because these are the safest targets. Or maybe you could say, no, it's because, let's say we're talking about marriage. My husband is the most important thing in the world to me. So when he does something wrong, it really bothers me. I can handle it if someone else behaves that way. But my husband, it drives me crazy because he's my husband. Could be. It could be what's going on, but it doesn't make a difference. Why? It's still a problem. So work on speech, commit to positive speech, work on your thoughts. Thoughts are even more important. Speech flows from your thoughts. Maybe if it's hard to envisioning working on thoughts, like, whoa, that's overwhelming. Like, that's way too much. If you can be honest with yourself, you can maybe pick 3 super highways of negativity in your brain. What I mean is like 3 thoughts that you think recurringly. A superhighway is a thought you think again and again and again and again. Because the more you think it, the faster your brain slides on it. The faster you go on that road. The more we think a thought, the more strong that thought is in our brain. So we can all probably identify superhighways that are negative in our brain. Maybe certain fears we have that keep coming back to us. Certain childhood traumas we have that keep coming back to us, certain abusive relationships we've had that keep coming back to us. I mean, we all have junk in our brain one way or another. Well, here we're talking about very specific relationships. So I'm just talking about this relationship. If you want, you could globalize it and work on it in general in your thoughts, and that's amazing. But if you're talking about like this specific relationship, try to identify 3 not nice things you think about your husband. Like, oh, he can never get it together. A not nice, negative, not positive thought that maybe you've just thought so often it just superhighway. And of course, there's far worse. If you could identify 3 such highways in your mind and not let yourself go on them. And again, this doesn't just apply to your husband. You might feel like, I don't have any of this with my husband, but with one of my children, I do, or with this other person in my life, I do, or with my sister, you've used the same technique for anyone. I said, I'm talking about husband. I think this is the most critical relationship, and you can feel free to apply this to any relationship. It works for all relationships. So let's say you're talking about a child and you're like, I'm scared the way they're acting. Who would ever want to marry them? How will they ever manage in life? How will they ever survive, or anything like that? Any thought that you recurringly think that's negative, just select 3 and don't let yourself think at least those 3. Identify them and like, oh, that highway, I want to make overgrown ground. I want to make it fall into disuse. I'm stopping those 3. Of course, from stopping 3, you get more sensitized and you should stop many more. But sometimes it's a little easier if you select very specific thoughts to not think, instead of just in general saying, I'm going to identify everything negative and I'm not going to let myself think of it, and I'm going to turn it to positive, or just not think. I'll think about something else. Now, sometimes, of course, a person could say, well, I mean, the reason why I have these negative thoughts and words is because of how I'm being treated by your spouse, by your child, by your mother-in-law, by your colleague, by your boss. I'm responding, my thoughts, if not in my words, to how I'm being treated. So if you know that's true and you're working on the relationship because you want to shift it, think in advance. It's very hard if it's just on the moment, but in advance, feel compassion. Work on the muscle of compassion for why he or she or they are treating me this way. Why does my mother-in-law always feel a need to put me down? Why does my sister always feel a need to put me down? Why does my child always feel a need to separate from me? Just start. You might not have the details, but feel compassion. The more you feel compassion in the relationship, the less you can be hurt by the relationship. You want to practice this compassion in advance. What I mean by practice is, think about this person, whoever the relationship is you're working on, you'd like to shift, and think about what they would have done that makes you hurtful because you've been hurt, and reframe it and saying like, wow, they must be hurting a lot to want to treat me that way. They must be hurting a lot to want to hurt me that way. They must be hurting a lot to treat anyone that way. And have compassion for how they must be hurting, which is true. That is why they're treating you that way. And work on feeling compassion for them with their limitations, compassion for them for what they've been through, compassion for them for their weaknesses. So then the next time you're with the person, they actually do this thing that you've been preparing in your brain, boom, you can go into the compassion mode because you practiced it in advance. I know this person isn't trying to hurt me. I know they're not meaning it the way I'm coloring it. I'm framing it. You could, of course, say to them, I mean, depending on the person, depending on the relationship, I know you didn't mean it that way, but just the way I look at things, it's felt very hurtful. So if you could please not say that again. Again, that's a very generic sentence, and it depends on the relationship if that line does or doesn't work, and maybe another line works, and maybe no line works, and you just know they're not going to shift. But of course, if you can, obviously you would like to stop hearing things that you have to work through to not get hurt by. But if you can, or if you can't, that doesn't take away the work of compassion. The work of compassion for the person, for their pains, for their baggage, for what they've been through that's making them treat you this way. Obviously, if somebody in your life does things to deliberately hurt you or plays any other negative games, really work hard not to engage. Don't play back. Our sages say when you fight with someone who's dirty, you get dirty. So stay clean. Don't respond in kind. Don't give yourself permission to respond, because that's how you were spoken to. But it really, really helps if you worked before on compassion. Anyone could think, you don't have to say what, but many of you could take a minute to try to think of a word, a phrase, or a thought they would like to remove from their vocabulary or from their mental thoughts. Again, it could be in terms of a specific relationship. It just might be a negative thought you go to often that colors a lot of relationships. But if anyone can think of a word they are not going to let themselves say, they can substitute it with another word, but that word they're not going to let themselves say, a phrase they're not going to say, or a thought they're really going to try to commit to not think because they know it's not good for them. And again, it could be about a specific relationship with a specific person that word or words or thought comes, or it could just be in general, some negative words or thoughts you go to, which color all your relationships and color your perspective on yourself. I'm the only one. Okay, wow, that's really cool. If I'm the only one that has anything that I'd like to change in my speech or thoughts, very amazing. It really does.
I use the word always a lot. That's what came to mind in my head. And it's not really a good word, you know, because
Mhm.
it's not true. It's never true. So I can't figure out on my phone how to raise my hand. So, but yeah, so that's a word I would like to, um, you know, stop.
I
And
totally hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. That is definitely could be one of those very seemingly so innocuous and actually a very powerfully negative word. I think that's a great choice. I wrote down a few. I think my strongest go-to is the thought, I can't handle this. And I have been much better at it because I've already thought about this and uprooting this thought many times. So it definitely has a weaker hold on me than it used to. It's not my most natural thing to think, but I would like to eradicate it completely. I can, and what I want to do, because so what Simcha's example is very simple. You just drop the always. If you're actually having a phrase like, I can't handle this, you have to think what you're going to substitute it with. So what I would like to substitute it with is I can handle this. Anything I'm given, I can handle. God gave this to me. I can handle this and it will be fine. It will be successful. It will work. I can handle this. I can handle this very, very well. So it's good when you think of something you want to drop that you also think of, if appropriate, like mine was more and Simpla's needs less, what you're going to substitute it with. Anyone else? Anyone else can either think of something they will try to work on not saying or not thinking. Again, it might sound like really hard. How can you control your thoughts? But that's foundational to our work, is knowing we can and must control our thoughts. The same way we control what we do, the same way we control what we eat, the same way we control what we say, we have absolute ability to control what we consciously think. We can't control our subconscious, but our conscious thoughts we can control. And when you think you can control your thoughts, it's almost like you're a hostage to your thoughts. And when you realize you can control your thoughts, it's actually a very liberating experience to watch yourself control this whole arena that maybe your whole life you didn't think you could control. All right. So I'm glad Simcha came up with something. I'm glad I came up with something, and Rivka. And I hope maybe other people like Simcha just couldn't figure out how to raise their virtual hand. But please, we all benefit. We all benefit when we just like really look at ourselves and really identify something, one thing, two things, three things. I came up with a few that we would like to not go there. Not healthy, not good, not how I want to be thinking. Very toxic, and I don't need toxins in my brain. Another idea. Now, again, we're going back to the idea, as I said in the beginning, everything I'm saying, everything I've said from the beginning until now applies to any relationship you would like. You can apply to any relationship. I'm going to the idea of husband because that's probably most critical, but maybe your relationship with your husband is like no issues there. But there are other people in the world maybe that you could, it would be worthwhile investing in. Why should you work so hard on something? Okay, you understand with your husband, it's a worthwhile relationship. Why do you have to work so hard with your relationship with your boss? I mean, they're obnoxious. Why do you have to work hard on the relationship? Because you see them 8 hours a day. Because if, again, when we say, I'm going to rewind what I just said. So you understand, if you're talking about a husband, that's a very critical relationship. Of course, it's worth the work. But if you say my relationship with my husband's wonderful, but my boss is obnoxious. Let's even pretend there's truth to it and your boss is obnoxious. It still doesn't take away your onus of responsibility in the relationship. Or to put it in different words, you are still harming yourself when, because you have a relationship with an obnoxious person, you have all this negativity inside of you. Maybe not expressed because it's your boss, but you have all this negativity in your emotions and your thoughts. That's toxic for you. That's putting you in a bad space. That's unhealthy for you. So either you could say, why do they deserve, or they don't deserve, or why should I bother? But you should bother because you care about yourself. You should bother because you, as a healthy person, should have a positive inner and outer frame, always. And guess what? When you do that, because a relationship is a dynamic between two people, I do believe you will see a shift from the other side as well. It's very, very amazing. And I've seen this, thank God, many times when people who totally feel like they're the victim in the relationship, they totally feel just the other person's being obnoxious, to use that word, nasty, hurtful. But when they shift, the other person actually shifts also. Maybe it doesn't stay, but the other person really does shift because there's a dynamic in the relationship. That does not mean you were the reason for the problems, but it does mean that you're curing yourself actually frees another person and helps them shift as well. So do they deserve it? What do I care? Like, why should I invest in that relationship? I care. If you want to say it, just because I care about myself and I want to be healthy in my relationships, I care because when I invest in this, it will actually shift the relationship. So again, I'm going to say husband, but this applies to anyone. The first idea we spoke about was writing your gratitudes twice a day, 5 things each time. The second thing we were just speaking about was committing to identify and change negative speech and negative thoughts. The third idea I'd like to propose is, again, thinking I'm saying about your husband or whoever the person is, really taking a paper and brainstorming positive qualities. All the positives you can see in this person. And again, you could say, no, my husband, I see it all over. Great. Maybe do this for another person, or maybe you don't need to do this. But if it would help, writing down something you appreciate, something unique, some empowerment, some compliment, just write and write and write, and then look for an opportunity to express it. A lot of times we have this almost like hang up about complimenting another person, like sort of I don't know why, whatever we tell ourselves. Complimenting another person is a great thing to do if you're doing it sincerely. So you want to write down very specific things, very specific, special things that you can appreciate. And then you want to look for opportunities to share those things, to express them. And that's really, in the ideal world, like I guess how we will behave in the days of redemption when Mashiach is completely revealed, that would really be how we will all be in all our interactions. We will just say positive, empowering things to the people in our world, because that is the best way to be. It's very cute. My daughter actually pointed this out. Really, that would be our go-to. That if I'm interacting with any other person, I want to say something positive to them. I want to give them some empowerment. And that's really what happens when we compliment. Because as I said, some of us have hang-ups and don't have a good feeling about complimenting. Maybe we get complimented in ways that make us uncomfortable, so we don't like doing it. But when you're complimenting, you're really expressing an underlying trait. You really go for what's really beneath what you're saying and say it. So the person really understands that you really appreciate it. It's really valuable. It's not, oh, that was nothing. That was stupid. Like, what are you making a big deal of something so little? So if you could say to the person, oh, it's so nice you cleaned up. And that's a compliment. Or you could say to the person, it's so nice you cleaned up. It really made me feel taken care of. Oh, that's suddenly much more powerful, much more meaningful. You could even take it a step further and say, it's so nice you cleaned up. It really made me feel taken care of. It was really compassionate of you. So I went even like one step deeper in my compliment. That's so empowering. I'm acknowledging that the person cleaned up. So hopefully they'll do it again because they'll see I really appreciate it. I'm acknowledging my own vulnerability here, so to speak, that why I really appreciate it, because you were taking care of me. And that feels good. And I'm even going deeper to say, this shows you're really a compassionate person. Oh, wow. I didn't know I was. Men are not very self-aware. We are much more introspective. So when you, especially for a man, when you identify his strengths, you're really giving him a gift. You're giving him a gift of self-awareness. You're giving him a gift of empowerment. Now, obviously, women have strengths men don't have, and obviously men have strengths women don't have. Obviously, some things he's not going to do as well as you. And if someone here had little children and they left the house for 3 hours, it would be a very good idea before you walk in, you mentally prepare yourself to know what that house is going to look like and what your kids are going to look like after being taken care of by their dad for 3 hours. But that's okay, because he doesn't have my strength, not because he's personally weak. You could generalize and say men are better in a crisis than women. That might be true, that might not be true. But let's say we want to say that's true. Men are better doers than women. We each have different strengths as per our job, as per the reason we're in this world. So sometimes the reason I'm going into this is because we could look at our husband, here going back to husband, but again, this could apply to anyone in your life. And we could be like, oh my gosh, compliment him. I should thank him for watching the kids for 3 hours. You know what the house looked like when I came home? I should compliment him for this, blah, blah, blah. I do far more every single day. Maybe that's true. Maybe you do far more every single day, but you're not him, you're you. Maybe you're far more strong. Maybe you're far more capable. Maybe you're far more put together. And hopefully, because you wrote down your list of all of his wonderful qualities, you realize in other ways, he's far more than you. But this idea of the compliment, and especially this type of layered compliment, is really a very powerful tool. And again, what I'm suggesting, I'm not claiming I do it. Maybe I'll inspire myself and do this. What I'm suggesting is that's really how we should be with everyone in our life, not even people in our life, with everyone we talk to, with everyone we interact with. Imagine what a world would be like. That's why I said that's probably going to be by the redemption. Imagine what a world is like if that's every human encounter feels like that. So again, it's a very big thing to jump to. So you can start with one person. And maybe you're not going to say every interaction, but maybe you'll say once a day with one specific person. And then maybe you'll branch out and then do it with 2 people. And maybe you won't say once a day, maybe you'll say once every 2 days. And maybe you'll do it then with a 3rd person, or maybe you'll take one person and do it twice a day or 3 times a day. But all of these things change us, which goes back to my point that I was saying, like, well, why should I bother working so hard on my relationship with my obnoxious boss? Because if I have all these negative energy toxins in my system, it's really bad for me. And if conversely, I become a person who empowers others, who sees others, who focuses on the strengths of others, who gives them an awareness of their strength, wow, imagine what type of person I've become. All right, so we shared 3 ideas. I tried to make it really practical. I'm not done. We'll have part 2 next week. Try to make it really practical. Try to make it something you could feel you have some ability to grab onto, and some relationship in your life that you'd like to enhance with any or all of these ideas. You don't have to walk away with all, but if you could take one, it would be a very worthwhile class.